Hey there, I'm Krista Lindstrom from Mortgage Simple, and welcome to Krista's Mortgage Minute. Today, we're going to talk about the stress test, and has the stress test overstayed its welcome? There's a lot of people who would argue, yes, indeed it has. So first of all, what is a stress test? So the stress test came about many years ago when the federal government realized that interest rates in Canada were relatively low, and they were worried that if interest rates rose in Canada, that Canadians wouldn't be able to afford their mortgages when they came up for renewal. Makes sense. Very good idea at the time. So they implemented a stress test. So a stress test means that you qualify 2% higher than what you're actually paying. So let's say your interest rate is 4.5%. You actually qualify at 6.5%, and it limits some of your buying power so that when your mortgage comes up for renewal and your interest rate is higher, you're going to be able to qualify for the mortgage. And I would argue that they were highly effective with the stress test, because when the interest rates really high in Canada post-COVID, we didn't have a massive housing crisis with people not being able to afford their mortgages. So it worked. But the bigger question is, now that rates are high and we're at the top of the rate cycle, why are we still doing it? So there's two areas that I want to talk about regarding the stress test: renewals and purchases. And we did see some relief earlier in the year when the federal government said that you do not have to stress test when your mortgage comes up for renewal if you have an insured mortgage. So you paid the CMHC premium. However, most Canadians aren't in that boat. They don't have mortgage insurance, and those Canadians are still stress testing. Why? The other area that I wanted to talk about is purchases. And I would argue that the stress test has the biggest impact on first-time home buyers here in Canada. There are a lot of people in that 25 to 35 year range who have been cut out of the home buying market in some of Canada's major markets, and they would love to see the stress test leave in a not so graceful way. So I guess there's a bit of an argument here. Is the stress test inflationary or inclusionary? I actually read something on this and I actually really liked it. So is the stress test inflationary? So if we were to remove the stress test, would house prices in Canada increase significantly? I don't know. Or if we remove the stress test, does all of a sudden the stress test removal become inclusionary? Does it now allow, now that we're at the height of the market, does it now allow that younger generation to be able to purchase a home that they were previously cut out of due to qualifying 2% higher? In my opinion, this is a bit of a really tough argument because housing is federal in Canada, and I actually don't think that this is a federal decision. It would actually be really fantastic if I could wave my magic wand and decide by province which provinces need a stress test, because I would argue that BC and Ontario, with extremely high house prices and high interest rates, no longer require a stress test. But in Alberta, I would argue that a stress test would still be relevant in order to keep a tap on the Alberta market, which is quite strong right now. And we're seeing unconditional offers, and removing a stress test would just make things go haywire. So I know that housing isn't federal. I know that housing isn't provincial, it's federal, but it sure would be nice to see some variance by province. Anyway, what's your opinion on this? Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you later.